Good day, everyone, and welcome to EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. I'm proud to have engineer Mike Herzog with us again today. How's it going, Mike?
Awesome, David. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, doing pretty good. I got some interesting articles today. They may not be big on the engineering side, but I think they're, you know, r- some big news, if nothing else. And one of the things that I want to talk about to start with is Tesla and Toyota. And so Toyota has agreed on their upcoming electric vehicles. They're going to switch to the NACS charging standard from 2025, giving them access to 12,000 superchargers here in the United States. One nice thing is the Tesla superchargers tend not to fail quite so often as the 20 other other providers of charging stations in the United States. And so that's a real big it's a boost for potential EV customers. Toyota perhaps hedged a little bit on whether the NACS will be on all of its clean fuel cars, saying that certain models under its umbrella will allow for the technology. But I feel that's a pretty big win for Tesla, and I think it's a win for Toyota too. You've heard me talk about this before.
Mhm.
You've got a Tesla as your first experience, or you're getting the experience kind of thing. And
Yep.
this is a good thing with them. What's interesting is Toyota is real big on the plug-in hybrid model versus the all electric.
Mhm.
They're not as completely sold on all electric yet. And this gets to be kind of interesting because they are definitely putting more emphasis on on plugins. And then their theory is that they can use 1/10 the amount of batteries in the plug-in hybrids than they would on a full EV, and so they can make 10 more 10 vehicles
Yeah.
instead of just one. It's an interesting look on things as to how, they may be able to do that. Um,
For sure. There's a couple of things there. One, you said it wasn't going to be engineering heavy, but standards. Standards are the first step to everything in standardizing what we do. And there's the easy visual of it. Well, what if different gas stations had different size gas nozzles? When you went to plug it into your car, and sure, here's an adapter, here's a funnel. Go stick it in there and just pour it in. And some cases, that's effectively what we have. Between the two of these, but starting to move towards a standardization where you take away some of that anxiety, you take away some of that trepidation, you take away, hey, if I pull in here, do I have the right adapter? Do I have the right end on this plug and whatever it looks like? And it's just another car manufacturer moving towards that NACS standard, which is great. That's what we want to see.
well, you look at it even on gas vehicles. You go to some gas stations and they have 3 different pump handles, and they might
Yeah.
have 6 different flavors of fuel. You've got diesel,
Mhm.
E85, you got regular, standard, premium, no ethanol. All of these different things. You're like, oh, which one does my car take?
Yeah.
And in reality, if you're driving a gas-powered car, you don't want to be constantly changing it around. E85 was a an accident. I swear it was to support the corn industry is all I can
Oh,
figure because
I believe
you get
that. Yeah.
you get a third less mileage and power, and you only get about a 10 to 15% savings on the fuel. If it costs
Savings in
half,
cost. Yeah.
and that's another
Yeah.
area. If on E85, if the government had cut all the taxes in half or something to make it more economical, maybe
Mhm.
that would have been something that was
Would
viable.
change
There
a
was
lot.
never any
Yeah.
real incentives. The market tried to do that and it never really could. You see all those flex fuel vehicles, and I'm like, well, that's great. You got a flex fuel. I hope you don't accidentally put E85 in it. You know,
Yeah, I hope you don't.
and
Yeah. The other one on there of Toyota's approach to this, I can't disagree with it. It's just everything still seems to be so slow rolling, but that goes back to how often do you drive your car every day? No, if you're a heavy commuter and what that looks like, even a heavy commuter, if you have a battery that can get you 30 miles every day, you're not dipping into that gas tank. It's out there, and once again, it just helps with the barriers to adoption that we're seeing with electric vehicles, where there is that anxiety, range anxiety. And what does it look like? How do I do that? And I don't want to take away, my ability to fill up at a gas station. What if EVs don't stick around? And for whatever reason, this fizzles out and goes away. Now I'm stuck with this car for the next 10 years that it's going to get harder and harder to charge it and what it looks like. No, I don't think that's the trajectory we're on, but
No,
fear, right? That people from doing it. So it's Toyota's taking the approach of let's lower the barriers to adoption, ease people into it a little bit rather than jumping into the deep end. So I hope to see that play
I
out
think for
for him.
most people, going from a
Big good
gas to a
vehicle.
yeah, I think the concept of going from all gas to a plug-in hybrid is a leap that most people can envision. For a lot of them,
Mhm.
it's a scary jump into the all electric. And, a lot of it also depends on, do you have two cars in your family or more? If you do, then having at least one that's all electric makes a lot of sense. It's just like, I think it'd be really cool to have an Archimoto, you know, three-wheel electric vehicle for driving around here in
Yeah.
the summertime. But realistically, you're probably not going to drive it more than 100 days a year here, if even that. I mean, the weather would support it, but I'm just saying for other uses, you're not always going to be solo or with one other person. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
it's a different. It's just a different kind of thing, and I'd love to see those get adopted more, but it's just not the necessarily the best
It's
solution.
tough. We're
Anyways,
built for gas vehicles. Yeah. Five to seven seat gas vehicles. That's what we're built for.
so this next article I got is from Jalopnik, and this is kind of interesting because they're saying Volkswagen cuts workers as brand deemed no longer competitive. With EV battery prices dropping, Subaru factory wages are on the rise. Let's see. Things aren't too hot at Volkswagen. They're having a $11 billion savings program, which will include staff reductions. The German car makers in the midst of negotiations with the Works Council over a cost-cutting scheme at VW, the first step in a group-wide drive to boost efficiency and the transition to electric cars. With many of our pre-existing structures, processes, and high costs, we are no longer competitive as the Volkswagen brand. And I think a lot of this is the rise of China in the car manufacturing business. China is ahead of everybody but Tesla in making electric cars. And it's interesting to see how a lot of that is playing out. The downsizing is being handled humanely with partial or early retirement covering the sum total of the layoffs. That's a pretty cool safety net. So they're not really just laying people off.
Mhm.
Your next EV's
Yeah,
battery.
and I was reading the article and saw that one pop up, and that's one of those. It's a catchy headline, and provocative headline, but then you read that detailing. Okay, they're changing their workforce around, and early retirements or pushing people into retirement, and what that looks like. So, it's I think there's a lot to be said about that, and the point you just brought up of electric vehicles from China penetrating Europe. Where in the stateside, we see Volkswagens pretty regularly, but gosh, in Europe, they're ubiquitous. They're all over the place. It's a big one. So them getting hit in that market, especially, has got to be hurting them.
No, there's no
Which this is
question.
been said.
Yeah, no question. According to Bloomberg, annual lithium ion battery price survey, the battery packs fell to $139 per kilowatt hour from 161, a 14% drop. That's a pretty big savings. That's almost a sixth,
Yeah.
and that's a big change. Cheap EVs haven't succeeded in the US the way they have abroad, but maybe that's because they haven't been cheap enough. Knock 10 grand off the leaf, and people will be lining up for it, I'm sure of it. Let me see. Subaru raises wages after the UAW strike. That's kind of interesting. Well, they weren't affected by the strike, but they raised wages so
No.
they don't get hit with it too.
Yeah, that's preemptive. Like, uh-oh.
So they're saying the UAW, in theory, brought wage increases to GM, Ford, Stellantis, Honda, Toyota, and Subaru. And Tesla talked about they raised wages at a lot of their plants. But I mean, with the way worldwide inflation has been, you have to raise wages. I mean, and
Yeah.
a lot of times that's the reason why inflation occurs is because wages go up, there's more money dumped into the market, and so then it
Hmm.
raises the price of goods because there's more demand for
Hmm.
goods and services. And so that's a lot of the way things work. And this is one of the things when they start talking about, well, let's force everybody to raise wages. Well, that's great, but then what happens is the cost of goods and services
What
go up
happened? Mhm.
with it. It may be that some people, now if only certain people raise their wages, maybe it doesn't affect other sectors, you know. And so that's kind of
Mhm.
makes for, some kind of interesting stuff. Here's an article that I told you I'm going to roll my eyes at. This is from Electric. Auto emissions could have dropped by 30%, but SUVs ruined it for everyone. So they're blaming the fact that emissions haven't gone down more because people have switched to SUVs. And I guess it depends on what you define as an SUV, because I've been in some pretty damn small SUVs. There's some out there. I didn't realize they made SUVs as small as they are. I mean, could you call a smart car an SUV? I mean, it kind of stands up tall, right? I mean, it's the rolling
Yeah.
egg.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just a different shape. SUVs represent 51% of the new car market. The average light duty vehicle weight has bulked up to an all-time high of more than 1.5 tons. The size of SUVs is growing with a footprint averaging around 4.2 square meters, about 45 square feet. Plus, automakers make a huge profit from SUVs, which are sold at premium prices but have a proportionally lower manufacturing cost, so they are eager to market them to consumers. Well, the best-selling car in the world is the Tesla Model Y. I mean, technically it's a crossover, but it's still an
Mhm.
SUV. Electric vehicles, which represent 15% of global new car sales in 2022, use 3 to 6 less times energy than ICE vehicles to travel the same distance. You know, part of the issue there and is a lot of these global car sales are a very small EVs being sold in China. And so their cars are smaller. And the United States Americans are larger, Europeans are larger, and they're just larger people. I'm a larger person. Okay. I'm not overweight, but I'm still 6'3" and almost 250 pounds. Okay, I take up a lot of space, and I work real hard on my fitness, and I see some of this and it's like,
Mhm.
who knows? I was telling somebody yesterday, one of my tennis friends is 6'5", and I noticed he had a Chevy Bolt. And I was like kind of confused at first, and he said he's comfortable in it.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, that was
Yeah.
kind of interesting. The Bolt has a very high roof, so the
Mhm.
ceiling's up high
Mhm.
enough that he's okay in there. I've been in plenty of cars where my head was squished against the headrest, against the ceiling uh, of the vehicle, and it's kind of, you know, just
I feel you. I feel you. I'm 6'1",
yeah,
and I barely fit like airline seats.
yeah.
It's that much space between my knees. So I was thinking, I'm any taller than that, this would be very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I have some
Because I
unique
understand.
strategies for flying. Like there's one airline out of Omaha, I won't take at all. I
Mhm.
really like another airline, and I always book early bird seating so that I can
Mhm.
hopefully get exit row and other
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. And what's interesting is planes are flying full, and my understanding is you're using about less fuel by flying than you would if you were driving in a Prius cross country.
Really? Like if you proportion it out
Yeah,
per person
per
on them.
person on the plane.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see how some of that
Mhm.
is because once you get to a certain altitude and you're in glide mode, the plane is just
Mhm.
sipping fuel. It just really
Yeah.
doesn't use a whole lot of fuel once it gets up to
Mhm.
35,000 feet, and it just sort of glides almost to the target. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, most of
Talking about SUVs though, and the size, it is. I mean, just anecdotally, we were talking about Toyota earlier.
the
You talk about kind of their mid to larger size SUV like the Highlander, and
right.
they're smaller, small to mid size, the Rav4, and over the past decade, I mean, a RAV4 is the size of what a Highlander was 10 years ago.
Oh,
And
really?
now the Highlander, they're even coming out with the new model. Anecdotally, they seem bigger to me at least. And now they're coming out with an even new model, the Grand Highlander, which is even
Oh,
bigger, and what it looks like and everything. And I'm not knocking it. I love the convenience, right? I have 3 kids and a dog.
hmm,
A larger SUV and having that space and sticking the luggage and everything like that, it makes sense. Now, on the same hand, I think, 5-10 years ago, maybe 2015 ish, gas mileage was pretty rough on a
right,
lot of those vehicles. But on the same hand, the new Toyota SUVs, they're all hybrid.
right.
Um, the minivan, their Sienna minivan gets 36 miles to the gallon, highway and city. Like
Big
that's
improvements.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's huge
Yeah.
improvements that we've seen in that realm. You also don't want your kids so close together they're throwing elbows.
Yeah.
As long as you're out of elbow range, I think that's kind of the key.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Even if
Yeah.
they're not intentional elbows. Yeah, you don't want the kids in the back seat feeling like they're in an airplane.
Hmm.
Yeah, no. But growing size is a huge problem, which is threatening many aspects of sustainable mobility. Well, I mean, you think about this even in terms of there's a new Cadillac Escalade that's an EV coming out next year,
Yep.
and it has a 750, no, has a 500-mile range, 750 horsepower. Can you imagine how big the batteries must be in that damn thing?
Oh, that thing's a tank.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
got. I mean, that's got to
it's
weigh
got
a
to be
couple of tons, right?
it's gonna. I bet it's gonna be 7, 8 thousand pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, easy, easy. Even a Tesla Model X is about 5,800 pounds, I think. Maybe it's six
Hmm.
thousand pounds. They're pretty heavy. They're heavier than you would imagine, and the batteries add a lot. I don't know if you've ever seen the stuff where they've tried to roll them over. No matter how you make
Mm-mm.
them roll over, if it rolls over on the side, it'll roll right back onto its four wheels. They're kind of like a Weeble. Weebles
Yeah,
wobble.
yeah.
It's essentially the same thing. That they're so heavy in the very bottom of the car that even if they roll on their side, they will roll back.
It wants to settle back
Yeah,
down
it'll
on the
always
heavy
settle
part.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you never can really get trapped in a Tesla that's upside down or something like that because it'll always roll back onto the four wheels. Um, I don't know if that was intentional, but that's just something that happened. But that's
Hmm.
kind of the way they are. Large, heavy electric SUVs, while they have zero tailpipe emissions, also have enormous battery and energy demands, not to mention the fact they kill more pedestrians than any other vehicle. Reversing the trend toward bigger and heavier vehicles is key to achieving more sustainable mobility. 100 years ago, the reason we adopted the cars, part of it was because horses were killing people and horses were running people over and killing them. The number of pedestrian deaths from horse and buggies in big cities across the world was unacceptable, along with the horse crap
Hmm.
problem. And cars were the solution to that. So now we're solving the car problem by switching to electric. I guess we have to pick and choose. You know, um,
Yeah.
gov- this report calls for governments to set caps on vehicle size on hybrid and electric cars as well as ICE to reverse the SUV trend and help accelerate the shift to smaller EVs. Paris is proposing one such restriction right now. In Europe, I can kind of see it to a degree because the
This
cities
is
were
the
designed
way they're
before the
built, right?
roads,
Yeah.
right? But cities were
They were
designed
designed
before
for a
cars,
horse cart. Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
so, you've got kind of a different situation. American roads were designed to be kind of wide open, and maybe not New York
They're
City,
but no, or one of the hallmarks of American achievement is the highway and interstate system, which is
right?
move people large distances. Partially for military purposes in World War II. Hey, we can move people across the country quickly if we need to, and now we have a lot of that at our disposal. Like it's different. It's Americana. The road
Right.
trip and what it looks like. You know what? I want to be comfortable. I want this big
Well,
honking Land Cruiser type thing that's comfy.
You and you and I live in a part of the country where SUVs and pickup trucks are very common. So in the middle of the United States, that stuff's really common. When you start getting into some of your larger coastal cities, It's not as common because they're harder to drive, they're harder to park.
Mhm.
If you've spent any time in New York or LA, there's nowhere to park those, the bigger vehicles. And so that's a bit of
Mhm.
a challenge. But and where we're at, man, I live for Costco parking spaces. You know, not nothing better than a
Yeah, it's
Costco
built
parking
for it.
space. Right.
Uh-huh.
But my next one is a bit of a political hit piece. And so in 2024, Republican EV attacks may fall short as swing states reap investment. Now, this is kind of interesting. So at the presidential level, a lot of your presidential candidates talk about green energy and the climate as being a hoax. But at the state level, your state governors have all embrace the Inflation Reduction Act, and they've brought in tens of thousands of jobs into Republican-led states that are benefiting from the green energy jobs. And and almost no Democrat-led states have benefited from this. And it's really quite a reversal in how that is. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that the Republican-led states have different worker rights laws, and they're probably more
Mhm.
benefiting the employers and trying to make sure the employers can stay in business so that they can keep employing people. Whereas the other states have all these rules benefiting the employees at the expense of the business, that it tries to guarantee the success of the employees, but the business may fail. Well, the problem is the investors who put money into the business are the ones that own the business. And
Mhm.
so the business has to fulfill, create shareholder value. That's their job, is to maximize shareholder value. And so you've got a bit of a quandary there. But so what happens is the Republican led states attracted all of the actual investment in manufacturing from the Inflation Reduction Act, like 100% of it. It's crazy how that worked, and
Mhm.
the jobs that were created. The governors all love it, and it's really quite an interesting thing to see. And you know, Biden and the Democrat congressional candidates are seeking to exploit some of this for the November vote. But in reality, I really wish this would stop becoming a partisan issue.
Mhm.
I don't, like you and I both know, electric vehicles aren't going away. And people just need to realize it's going that way, and then in some way people need to embrace how they're going to handle it. I'm not saying that one side or the other is handling it, but they're very kind of extreme, and you and I both know that reasonable people are, somewhere in the middle. Doesn't necessarily mean it's right
Yeah.
down the middle, but there's some reasonable flexibility from a reasonable person. And the majority of American voters want something that's reasonable and good for the country, not necessarily,
Yep.
because I've had this argument before. If somebody is yelling too loud that you have to do something, it usually tells me that they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so, and I see this way too much on the green energy side. People try, this is kind of a issue with leftist types, is that they try to scream and influence people's decisions, and that just doesn't work. And you're not going to
Yeah,
win
it's
friends and
off-putting, right?
influence people. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. And
I mean, it's one of those, and I watch a lot, so I lean left. I consider myself pretty,
Mhm.
but I tend to lean left on a lot of these things. And you see some of those tactics that people take. You go, that's not gonna telling people what to do is not gonna work. That doesn't work here. We don't like being. But it's the same discussion with the EVs and everything like that. Like you said, it's so far on both sides that neither side seems to be able to accept the argument. Like, well, maybe it's not for me today. Um, that doesn't mean
Right.
never, and that doesn't mean I have to do it today. Like, I can recognize that EVs are a good thing, and maybe, but it's not right for me today. Uh,
No, I see so
get some
much of
infrastructure
what's
built, get some more surety around maintenance.
you and I both see a lot of things that other people don't. And it's not that we're necessarily enlightened or whatever. It's just I see all these arguments about why EVs won't work and all this, and it's like, look, there's been solutions for that that are already in place. People already have adopted them. The fact that, I see people talk about, well, they won't work in Canada. It's like, well, for some reason, the biggest adopters in the world are the Nordic countries. So the five Nordic countries are the top five biggest adopters of EVs. Mind you, the
Mhm.
populations of those countries are like 5 to 10 million people each. They're not real big countries. But the fact that all
Yeah.
of their car sales pretty much now are electric vehicles, tells you something, and I realize there's been government incentives to make that happen. And there's still some gas sales going on in those countries, but it's interesting to see the perspective of where this goes on. Now, um, got another one here that I want to discuss a little bit, and this has to do with Ford. So this isn't necessarily an article, but we're going to discuss this a little bit. So in a surprising turn of events, more than 400 Ford dealers have opted out of the company's electric vehicle program. So, signaling a significant setback of Ford's ambitious plans for EV expansion. The decision comes after dealers initially committed to Ford's vision of sustainable future by joining the program about a year ago. Last December, CEO Jim Farley announced that 1,900 dealers had enthusiastically joined the program, with the majority opting for the higher tier certified elite category. However, recent developments revealed that 400 dealers have now withdrawn from the program, raising questions about the viability of Ford's transition to an electric car future. Now, Ford was charging people something like $1.2 million to be part of this. And a lot of that was to put in charging stations and other things. It
Mhm.
required the dealers to make substantial investments, with a higher tier demanding around $1 million for installation charges, electric car training, and additional perks such as demo units and rapid replenishment. A lower tier option, which was about $500,000, also existed but came with limitations on the number of cars dealers could sell, making it less appealing. Now, this represents, I'm trying to see where this is. Um, Enrollment in Ford's EV dealer program has dwindled to around 1,550 dealers, constituting 53% of its network. So 53% of Ford's dealers are still in this network, but that means that 47% of Ford dealers don't
Mhm.
sell EVs, at least not new ones. And that's kind of interesting because we got
Yeah.
a few considerable ones. You got the Mach E and you got the F-150 Lightning. This reduction may impact Ford's ability to compete with direct consumer rivals like Tesla. To counter this, Ford plans to establish retail replenishment centers to aid certified elite dealers in restocking inventory, thereby improving the efficiency of EV distributions. The challenges faced by Ford's EV program coincide with significant delays in the company's overall EV plans, involving a postponement of approximately $12 billion in EV spending. Despite these setbacks, Ford remains committed to its dealer-centric approach, opting not to go direct to consumer like some companies like Volvo has done with Polestar. As the automotive industry undergoes a transformative shift towards electric vehicles, Ford's experience serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the complexities and challenges associated with securing dealer buy-in for EV initiatives. The coming months will reveal whether more dealers will follow suit or if Ford can navigate these hurdles to realize its vision for a more electric future. It's interesting to see this because I hear, people blame the dealers. I hear the dealers blaming Ford, and you just really don't know what necessarily to suspect of what kind of goes
Mhm.
on there. I'm not
Well, and there's
sure.
one line that really stands out in there. It's oh, sorry, Dave.
No,
I
go
think I
ahead.
might have a delay on my end. No, I was going to say it's. I think the line that stands out to me in there is it's just delays in EVs being rolled out, and if you're a dealer and it's a bottom line, so we'll pay $1 million for a hamburger next Tuesday. Like
Right.
no, I have day to day expenses. I need to clean these things up and what it looks like. You know, it's no, I can't fork out that dough today because I'm not going to see benefit from it for years.
Well, what's crazy is you figure we're near the end of 2023. In 15 years, probably 90% of car sales at Ford dealers are probably going to be electric. Okay. It may take that long. It may take longer than that. It might take 20 years. But eventually that's going to come.
Mhm.
And who knows where that's going to end up. I've seen Ford try some things with hybrids over the years. I remember there used to be a Ford Fusion hybrid as a sedan,
Mhm.
and there's been a couple of others. You know, but those hybrids, for the extra cost of the vehicle versus the gas mileage gain you got, it wasn't that significant to cover
Mhm.
the overall cost. And now you're starting to see hybrids really knocking it out of the park on the mileage. I mean, where they're doubling the gas mileage. And you start talking about saving, you know, uh, I don't know, a couple $100 a month maybe on a car, depending on how much you drive, and that starts adding up quite a bit. But anyways, I think we've had a pretty good show today, Mike. I appreciate the discussion. And anyways,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
will.
No, thanks for having me on.
All right, everybody, thanks for listening in, and until